All right. So hopefully the country that you found, the energy data is in front of you. And that, if you did a good job finding it, that might represent one of two very different things. So some sources of data just look at electricity production, but others look at everything, right? So total energy use. The difference in my head is that all energy use would be not just electricity, but also transportation, right? So how we fuel automobiles, trucks, trains, airplanes, how we fuel heating. And then I have cooking up here also. I think probably in the US that wouldn't quite be significant, but maybe in some places that is significant, looking at their total energy. Now the way we can tell which one we're looking at most of the time is if oil, right, or petroleum is significant, then we're looking at all, just do it fast so it's less annoying. Then we're looking at all energy use. If oil is not very significant, 2%, 3%, 4%, then we're probably looking at electricity. The exceptions would be the major oil exporting countries, so like Egypt, I think somebody had, like Iraq, Venezuela perhaps. Those countries might have so much oil that it's just cheaper for them to use it to make electricity than to sell it to somebody and then buy something else to make electricity with. All right, so take a look at your own country and then make that decision whether your country's data is just electricity or everything. And then if you don't know, if you can't really tell, then yeah, put your hand up and I'll come take a look and see what I think. Yeah? Natural gas does not count as oil. No, natural gas does not count as oil. Anybody not able to tell? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's what it's like. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. So I have a number of pieces or data sets that I'll show you. The first one is for the whole world, right? So this is probably the one that we'll end up comparing your countries to. And I have both, right? I have total energy, and then I have just electricity production. And you can see what I'm talking about. If we look at transportation and heat, as well as electricity, in 2010, a third of the world's total energy use was from oil, petroleum, right? 5% of the world's electricity was from oil and petroleum, same thing. All right. Gas, remember that means natural gas, not gasoline, right? So the stuff that comes out of your stove if you have a gas stove. That's 22% of the total energy, 23% of electricity, and then coal. Right? A quarter of our total energy use, almost half of the world's electricity production. So our fossil fuels, right, add up to a whole bunch. If we're looking at total energy, what is that, 82%? I'm adding well in my head today. If we're looking at just electricity, it's still, like, what is that, 60%? No, more than that. 75%, right? So that's a huge amount of total energy or electricity. So what else is on here? So nuclear, 15% of the world's electricity comes from nuclear. Biomass/waste doesn't really crop up for electricity, but does crop up for total energy use. So a lot of the world does heat their houses with wood. Even in this country, we use biomass for transportation, right? A decent amount of our gasoline mixtures include ethanol, right? So maybe, depends on the time of the year, but maybe like 10% of what you're getting when you fill up your car is ethanol, that's biomass. So it comes up in transportation and heat, not so much in electricity. Hydroelectric, we're talking 6% of electricity, and then other renewables, pretty small, right? 4%, and at least for this 2010 data, I found that a quarter of that 4% was from wind. So the rest would be what? Solar, what else? Geothermal, tidal. Is that it? I feel like there's one more. Waves we'll talk about, probably not. All right? So most of the stuff though, fossil fuel derived. It's a relatively small percentage. Now, I have United States up here. I think Patrick Rogers in the other section had US, so I I think it is important to see how we compare to the world as a whole. This is slightly more recent data. So this, let's see, is this good enough to read or not really?
Yes.
A little bit. So the yellow is natural gas, the dark color is coal, this orange color is nuclear, the green is renewables, and then the blue is petroleum. So is this all energy or just electricity? The petroleum is significant, very significant. So this is all energy use, right? Not just electricity. Without flashing back to the previous slide, let's see if we can recall how this compares to the world average from 2010. Is petroleum significantly different?
No.
I don't think so. I think it's very close. Natural gas? I think it's a little bit higher, not a ton. Maybe 5% higher. Coal?
Low.
I think coal is lower, like significantly so. Nuclear? It's, for energy, it's higher, right? A little bit higher, not a ton. Renewables?
High.
Maybe a little bit higher. That might be a more of a function of the 2-year difference than anything else. So what strikes me for total energy use is less coal, more natural gas, everything else about the same. Yeah, Emily.
The renewables in this one use biomass.
Ah, you're right. So Emily is close enough that she can read the stuff over here, so we get to see where the renewables come from. So it's 9.3% of our total energy. Almost half of that is biomass. So that's our wood and our ethanol, maybe a little bit of other stuff. Geothermal, 0.2%. Solar, 0.2%. Wind, 1.4%. Hydro, 2.8%. So if we include biomass in renewables like we've done here, well, then we are, well, actually, then we're this. We're doing less biomass, but more of the other stuff, I guess, is the take-home message there. So why do we do less coal, more natural gas? Cliff.
Coal is like produce a lot of pollution.
Okay, so what? You're right, so what?
That stuff up there.
Yeah, I mean, so we are a rich enough country that we can, spend more money to care about environment and public health more than some other countries might be able to. So we do have some technologies we try and use with coal to prevent it from having such terrible emissions, but it's tough to do. It's actually cheaper, it's easier to not do as much coal in the first place. So yeah, so we offset using less coal with using more natural gas, which burns quite clean. All right, so that's U.S. Any other thoughts or any other questions about U.S. total energy compared to the world? Okay. Now, nuclear was 5% of the world's total energy, 8.5% of our total energy. That is a significant difference. Most countries don't do nuclear at all. It takes a lot of technological know-how. It takes a pretty trained workforce. So of the countries that do nuclear, we're probably pretty low in terms of how much energy we're deriving from nuclear. All right, so what else? The other thing that I'll show you, the next two slides compare. This is for the world, but compare what made up the world's energy 30 years ago, 1973, with what makes up the world's energy in 2011. 40 years, not 30 years, 40 years ago. All right, so from like a few years before I was born to when you started school here. So let's notice differences. Oil is this kind of weird the purple-blue color. Coal and peat are this purple color. Biofuels and waste are yellow. Hydro is this little sliver. Nuclear is this little sliver. Natural gas is the green. So are we looking at all energy or just electricity? All energy, right? Because oil is huge, 46% in 1973, 31.5% in 2011. So the oil drastically reduced in the last 40 years. Coal has increased, so the other stuff obviously has to increase if oil's going down so much. So we made up a little bit of that increase with coal. We made up a little bit of the increase with natural gas, a little bit with nuclear, right? A tiny bit with hydro, and actually biofuel and waste has gone down. So we've made up using proportionally less oil with using a little bit more of all the other things. But please recognize this is proportionally less oil. We are burning more oil now than we did 40 years ago. right? 6,000 megatons of energy, MTOE, megatons of some unit of energy, 13,000 megatons of energy. So more than double the total energy used. So even though proportionally less oil, we are burning more oil than we did 40 years ago. All right, so that's the total energy. Let's look at electricity, and then I'll give you guys an opportunity to compare the country that you looked at with the world. So this is electricity, again, 1973, 2011. I think the colors are the same, I think. So oil, 24.6% to 4.8%. Oil is just too valuable of a commodity to use it for electricity now. 40 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. Coal, 38 to 41, so it's been pretty stable with what percent of electricity is generated with coal. Hydro, 21% to 16%, so hydroelectric's gone down a little bit. Nuclear, 3.3 to 11.7, so it's gone up quite a bit. In 1973, I think the oldest nuclear power plants had been producing electricity for maybe 10 years, right, where we were still building lots and lots and lots of plants. We were still kind of in that first wave of nuclear power plants. Natural gas, 12.2 to 21.9. 40 years ago, when you drilled for oil, you kind of just like lit the natural gas that came along with it on fire, so you didn't have to like bother with it. Right now we capture that stuff and use it, right? And then other, 0.6 to 4.5. And I think this tells me what other is. Other is geothermal, solar, wind, biofuels, waste, and heat. I don't know what the heat means. I don't know what that means. All right, other questions, comments about comparing 40 years ago to today? All right. So I'd like you to take a look at how the country that you got the data for compares to the world use in 2010. Right? If yours is electricity, only compare it to electricity. If yours is total energy, only compare it to total energy. We'll go around the room. Please, at most, tell us one major difference. If it's a small difference, just say, nah, it's similar to the world. All right? So take a minute, right? Be ready to share your one major difference, or be ready to say, nah, there's no differences. And you should start by telling us what your country is. And I don't really think Danielle needs to hear this part of class.